Gregory Keith Mann Jr., Keith to those who knew him best, was a 20-year-old from Wichita Falls, Texas. He had a fiancee and was a car salesman. On the night of May 10th, 1997, Keith got dropped off at his apartment by a couple of friends. Keith said he was meeting someone after midnight. The next day, Keith's car was found near his parents' house. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. As all of you know, my attitude concerning this podcast is more than just telling all of you about disappearances. Granted, when Unfound started over 8 years ago, I don't know if that was the plan. But now, it's now just as much about learning as it is listening. And I think all of us have changed for the better. We're no longer enticed to believe men when they say, "Oh yeah, my girlfriend jumped into a truck with a guy I didn't know and took off." Examples: Rosemary Rapp, Angela Green, Marion Hurley. Many in that category. We now know that when cars and people disappear together, they will most likely be found together, and the odds of foul play are low. Examples: Esther Westenbarger, Donald Irwin, Ron McNutt. An exception, of course, would be Eric Franks. We realize that walk-offs, when there are possible but not very probable suspects, are way more common than the non-true crime public could ever know. Examples: Robbie Hurt, Noah Davis, Charles Lushbow. And there is always room for all of us to learn more. Well, with Keith Mann, what do you see? You listeners, what does your vast experience tell you? Because we've come a long way. And now a summary of the case. Keith Mann started his life in New Mexico, but when he was about to start 9th grade, Keith decided he wanted to live with his father and stepmother in Texas. He ended up having 2 younger sisters who were over 8 years younger than he. Keith was great at baseball and even hoped of making it a career. Maybe not playing, but at least coaching. However, this ended up being one of the negatives in Keith's late teens. On his college baseball team, he felt he should have been starting, but he wasn't. This led to Keith dropping baseball and higher education altogether. But school did give Keith one great thing in his life: his fiancée. An engagement which started just a month before Keith went missing. So, on the evening of May 10th, 1997, Keith was out with his car dealership coworker Chris and Chris's fiancée. The popular story is that they were four-wheeling, but now in 2024, there's reason to believe they were also out looking for parties. Chris and his fiancée claim that during the night, Keith said he had to meet someone just after midnight, although Keith did not say who this person was. Keith got dropped off at his apartment at 11:45 p.m. He was never seen again. The next morning, the car Keith was driving from his car salesman job was parked next to his parents' house. The car was locked, but the trunk was ajar. There was no evidence to show whether Keith or someone else put the car there. Keith's disappearance is one that I've been interested to feature for a long time. It strikes me as the kind that if we can resolve it, we can gain insight into many others. Contemplate why law enforcement has never used the concept of using solved disappearances to resolve the unsolved ones, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1. Is it a coincidence or not that Keith went missing the day before his fiancée was to move in with him? Number 2, if Keith's disappearance is foul play, why would a suspect ever park his car right next to his parents' house? And number 3, Are you inclined to believe Keith had a beeper or not? Keith's family, 27 years later, is still not sure what to think about his disappearance. The guests for this episode are Keith's stepmother, Deborah, and his father, Greg. Unfound news. I'm taking a hiatus from podcasting. I know this is unexpected news for all of you. Hey, me too. The complete explanation is in a recording released on this feed at the same time as this episode. Long story short, I'll be back in 2025. Next, on that note, however, I hope to continue to do the live show on Monday nights. I need to stay in touch with all of you somehow. Finally, I did my interview Friday night with Jason Blair from the Silver Linings Podcast. It might be the best questioning of me, about me, and the podcast that has ever been done. Be looking for it to be released soon. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the parents of Keith Mann, Greg and Deborah. Deborah and Greg, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Good to talk to you on this, and everybody should know we're doing this interview on November 30th of 2024. Let's start here. Deborah, I'll start with you. Just tell the audience a little bit about your family, where you all grew up, or where you raised your kids. Besides Keith, if you have other children, boys, girls, how they all got along. What can you say about, your family in general?
Okay, well, Greg and I, we got married in January of 1980.
Wow.
Greg had been married before, so Keith was a product of that marriage. He was about 2, almost 3. He turned 3 in February. And we lived in New Mexico at the time. So we were able to have weekend visits with him. And after a couple of years, we ended up moving to different locations. And so if we were close enough, we would still try to keep that weekend visitation or every other weekend, something like that. But then Greg got the opportunity to move here to Texas in Wichita Falls in 1985. Yeah, 1985.
Okay.
And by then, we had our own daughter, Keith's sister, Brittany. She was about 1 when we moved here. And then we had another daughter a couple of years later, Sarah. And so we've been here ever since. When Keith got a little older and was into school, of course, we couldn't see him as often. So he would come in the summer or maybe like on a school holiday. And we had a fun time.
Yeah.
We would do a lot of activities, especially with our girls, they like going to the zoo. We'd go down to Fort Worth, Dallas area, and there's so many different things down there to do. We'd go to the Rangers baseball games.
Yeah, Texas Rangers.
Football games. There's just so much to do. That's what it was. It was like just a fun time because it seemed like it was always vacation time when he was here. So of course we looked for activities to do, or Oklahoma City. We're kind of right in the middle. Like Oklahoma City is a couple hours north, Dallas Fort Worth is a couple hours south. So there was always plenty of things to do.
Yeah.
And the kids, they got along really well. Keith, of course, was quite a bit older, but we just had a good family life. We felt like. We attended church, so there was a lot of church activities. And Greg was into softball, so we were always on the softball field, seems like. We just had, a lot of good times.
Yeah. So, Keith, your son was approximately what? How much older than Brittany, the next daughter? What was the age difference there?
Let's see. It was about maybe like 8 or 9 years.
Okay. All right, so not close then. 8 or 9 years. That's a pretty good span. I'm not one to talk. I have brothers and a sister who are like almost 20 years older than I am, but still 8 or 8 or So, but 8 or 9 years, that's a little bit of an expanse. so when Keith was 20, she was 12. Did they have a lot of interaction? It's probably tough for a teenage boy to relate to two girls 8 or 9 years younger than them.
Right, yeah. Especially they're into Barbies and dolls and things like that. But they would play like video games. It had kind of just started coming out, so they would do that together. But yeah, especially the older one, she really kind of idolized Keith and just really looked up to him, and especially then when his girlfriend that turned into his fiance. When they were together, she liked having like this older sister type person in her life. So
sure,
she did, want to hang out with him quite a bit.
Sure. Now I should ask, being that it sounds like Keith spent most of his younger life, maybe a preteen into his teen years in New Mexico, when did he actually move permanently to the Wichita Falls area?
Well, it was after the summer of 8th grade. He came up and spent the summer with us, but decided that he would like to try high school here. So he ended up just staying. So that would have been, let's say, 9th grade for him would have been like 1991 to 92. So he decided full time, he was going to stay here. He was going to commit, to the 4 years, and just decided to get into the baseball program. And he did real well. I mean, it took him a while he was a little just average at first. That first year, he was just on the JV team, but they would practice. Greg and him would just go out and practice as much as they could. And he just improved. He just got better and better. I guess it was because all the other boys, played Little League all their lives. And I guess they got to a certain level and just kind of, stayed there. But him coming in late and just starting baseball at 8th grade, some of that summer he was on a summer team, so he just improved every year. He just got better and better.
Interesting. So he could make that choice once again. I really don't want to whatever if there was some custody arrangement between Greg and his previous wife. But Keith, that was up to him. He just decided that he could do that, and everybody was cool with that, to move from New Mexico to Texas.
Yeah. It was just a verbal agreement, and his mom was okay with that.
Well, that was nice of her. That was really nice of her. If that's what her son wanted, that takes. That was nice. Okay, thank you for explaining that. Okay, now let's move on to, of course, that's why we're here, because of Keith. Talk a little bit. Of course, we talked about baseball. You've already mentioned. You already mentioned video games, playing those with his sisters. What would you say about his personality? Outgoing, extrovert, introvert, life of the party, wallflower? How would you talk about Keith?
He was kind of a little bit of both. He was really shy and had a lot of social anxiety and things like that. But he was also funny, and he was always trying to make you laugh or smile, cracking a joke and all that. So I wouldn't say he was the life of the party, but he just tried to keep the atmosphere fun and, easygoing and all that. But he was, like I said, quiet and reserved at other times, polite, and he did well in school. We never had any problems, never got any calls from the teachers or anything like that. He just was very focused.
Pretty good student?
I think baseball. I'm sorry.
Pretty good student?
Yes, he was a good student, and baseball, I think, really helped keep him focused because, of course, they want you to have passing grades, but, he went above and beyond that. He pretty much A's and B's. He was pretty smart and kind of came easy to him. So since he was spending so much time on baseball, I don't really remember him studying a whole lot, but yet, he still got good grades, so that was good. But baseball, the requirements, it kept him. He never wanted to miss school because if he missed school, then he was missing practice, and that was very important to him to be there every day. So I really don't really remember him ever missing too much, unless he was just really, really sick. But it helped him have goals and things to work towards, and it just really helped him, I think, to have a good 4 years of high school.
You know, when he moved, you said he started, I guess, 9th grade there in Wichita Falls. How did he do for friends? Coming in, and it's all new people. You have a lot of kids who are already building those friendships, maybe from elementary school into junior high school. How did he end up fitting in pretty smoothly, making a lot of friends easily, or what?
Well, I think once again baseball helped him, because that was most of his friends was the guys on the baseball team, and reading. We have all his yearbooks, and so reading the comments of what the kids would all leave. I mean, it just seemed like he was such a easygoing type kid that people just seemed to like him, and thought really highly of him. So it just seemed like he didn't have a problem. He just kind of fit right in, and like I said, the baseball team, mainly his main friends. One of his best friends was another player. So those are the kids that he mainly hung around with. So that helped quite a bit.
Okay, good. All right, so we have this going on. Of course, he graduated, and of course, we're going to talk about this job that he had. I think plays a significant role, being that he was driving one of their cars when he went missing, and we'll get into his work that he was doing there in Wichita Falls in a bit. But I want to go to this, and of course, when he went missing, he was only 20, only quote unquote 20 years old, but he was already engaged. Of course, that's a little, I think, rare. Even maybe in the 90s, seems very young to me. Of course, easy for me to talk. I've never been married, but how did that all come about? Tell the listeners a little about this young woman, and what did both of you think about them getting engaged at such a young age? Let's just be honest. This, at least for the late 20th century. What did you think about all that?
Well, we really liked her a lot. She was a wonderful person, just very smart, and she had goals. And I think the whole engagement thing came up is because, they had dated about a year and a half. She was fixing to graduate from college, and the choice was either go back home to her hometown of El Paso, or come here with Keith. And I think she wanted that commitment that, okay, I'm going to be, no family's around, I'm here in a strange town, and, I want this commitment from you, and I can tell my parents, we're going to be getting married.
Wow.
They didn't really have a wedding date set or anything like that, but they definitely were planning on moving in together. They had rented an apartment. It was a 6-month lease. It was supposed to start in May, but I guess the previous tenants moved out early. I mean, it came up available, so they called Keith, and he ended up moving in about April 12th. So about a month early. So he was just there by himself, which we didn't see him too often. But Carrie would be bringing her belongings down. The college is only about an hour, a little over an hour, maybe an hour and a half at the most. And so every weekend, she would be bringing her boxes of stuff down, her clothing, stuff like that. So she was just about moved in, just waiting, for that graduation in May. And then the day that we found out Keith was missing, that was the day she was supposed to move in permanently.
Right.
And she already had a job lined up. She was supposed to start that Monday at it's a car rental place. So, she had her, all her ducks in a row. She had everything planned out. And that's what we liked about her. She was very organized. She was planned. She, she level-headed. And so, we liked her.
Yeah. So you would say this moving in plan that was supposed to happen in May, once again the day after he went missing, this had been in the works for a little while.
Yes.
This was not
Yes.
some like sort of spur of the moment, like at the beginning of May they decided they were going to live together. This had been going on for a little bit.
Right. And getting back to the actual engagement, that
Yeah.
was only in March of that same year.
Okay.
So they hadn't been, like I said, they hadn't been engaged very long. And to my knowledge, I never heard anything like, oh, well, we're going to get married on this date or, next year or anything like that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
they might have told other people, I don't know. But
All right. So I guess what you're saying is for both of you is that when you found out about this wasn't a concern of yours. You thought, I think these two make a pretty good couple.
Right, yeah, and we liked that, they got along, we never saw them argue, and they just seemed like a good couple, and, really, I guess at the time, we didn't think that they were that young, because I was 20 when I got married to Greg.
Then yes, that would be important, I guess that would lend a perspective to it, sure.
Right, yeah, and so since we were fairly young, I guess we just really didn't think anything of it and just, thought it was a smart move. And like I said, we welcomed her into our family and thought, that would be
great.
a good thing for him, help settle him down. He only went to 1 year, the junior college that they went to, he only went 1 year, so he didn't go back that second year. So it's like he didn't really know what to do with himself. He thought he was going to be playing baseball, like all the time, or the rest of his life, maybe get into some kind of career, coaching, doing something. But when that kind of fell through, and he didn't have plan B, he just didn't really know what to do. So he kind of he would, live with us for a little bit. Then he would go to his mom's out in New Mexico, maybe for a couple of months, then he would come back here, or, he was just kind of bouncing around, trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do now that I don't have baseball to,
Well, I have to ask, why did baseball end?
Greg, would you like to talk about it?
He got redshirted in college, first year out, and he didn't play anymore. I mean, he could have went back, but he just didn't do it. He came back here, started work and that sort of thing. But like Debbie said, he kind of lost himself when he didn't have baseball anymore.
Wow. I was a baseball player. I was a baseball player myself. I didn't attempt to play in college. I played intramural softball in college, but I was a pretty good baseball player, I guess, for high school. And so what you're saying about baseball is certainly, this topic is certainly something that I can relate to. And was it a situation where he thought he should have been playing and he thought he got passed over or something, or if you can?
He did.
He did.
He should have been playing.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was one of the, I guess, maybe from my perspective, he was one of those top players at Ryder High School when he was playing, and he should have played on that team, and he should have started. I was always on him about not practicing so much, and he didn't want to practice, I should say, and I was pushing him to do it, and I mean, he wanted to play, but he didn't want to put everything into it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Like a lot of kids, very, very common. I mean, that's not maybe, I guess in a way it's bad, but that's very common for teenagers, very common.
Yeah, it's like they want to be good, but they don't want to put in all the hard work.
Right.
But, I mean, he was used to being one of the top players, used to playing, every game. There's very few games where he didn't play, maybe when he was a little bit younger. But so to go from that, and then you go to college where all the kids on that team are now the star players, from their different high schools. So then you're in a different atmosphere to where it's very competitive. And I think just being away from home, not really having, that structure that he had in high school, he could go do whatever he wanted. He could, it was just a little different. So, he probably maybe didn't practice as much as he should have, and he didn't have, Greg, pushing him to do that. So he kind of maybe slacked, is all we can think of. But yeah, he kind of felt like he got a raw deal that, he should have played.
He should have.
And it just really discouraged him. Yeah. So he did not want to go back the next year. And, like that just kind of went downhill from there.
Okay, thank you.
He was an all-district player starting his sophomore year. So anyway, he was a really good player. In his senior year, he had the most home runs on the team. He had the most triples. He tied someone else with doubles, and he was in the top 10 in the district as far as average. And he can play. I mean,
yeah, sounds like it.
Anyways, it just happened, and that's the way life is, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate.
And also, he had
Please.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
He also had a lot of anxiety, which now we know is kind of like a performance anxiety, because we have a grandson now who's a musician, and he gets that really bad too. So it's like, oh, that's what Keith was experienced back then, is all this anxiety. So it was more mental. He was very good on the physical part of it, but on the mental, if he made a mistake or something happened, it was like he couldn't let it go. He couldn't.
I know the
he
feeling.
couldn't recover well enough, to be his best. So he had a lot of that, the mental part of it that he just couldn't conquer. So that's, I'm sure, pretty what happened in college is the coach, would yell at him, where he wasn't used to that in high school. The coaches weren't that hard on him, and they really liked him. So I'm sure they encouraged him and stuff like that. Whereas the college coach was a more vocal, yelling at you, especially when you made a mistake, so I'm sure that really affected his playing ability.
And his level, when you get to college, it's a little harder,
Sure, of course.
All the guys on the team are good, so you have to really work at it to start and play. I kept telling him. Right,
that's true. Thank you for explaining all this. So this is what was going on in at least in his the baseball part of his life. There, late teens, and it sounds to me like he got screwed over by possibly a coach. The way it sounds. Let's move on to this. Of course, he was working as a car salesman at the time of his disappearance. How did that all come about? How was he doing? How long had he worked there before he went missing? What can you say about that?
Well, he had started. He had heard about the job. I don't remember how he heard about it. Anyways, he worked there for about maybe 6 weeks or so. But he seemed to really like the job. He was getting up, going to work, and all, and seemed to really enjoy the work. At the time of his disappearance, he sold, what they say, a car and a half, but it's really 2, but half of it goes to someone else, But anyways, he had a couple checks coming to him Monday when he was supposed to go back to work, and he comes up missing, on that weekend. But he seemed to really, really like the job, and when he didn't show back up on the weekend, I knew something was wrong because he liked the job. He should have been there, been here somewhere.
So he was working there about 6 weeks before he went missing. So the way I'm kind of calculating this in my head, so he and his girlfriend getting engaged happened right around the same time that he got this job.
Yes, I was just looking at my notes here. I remember they got married. Got engaged the middle of March, and then he actually started this new job March 13th.
All right, so that's pretty close.
Actually, it was close to about 2 months. So he was there March, April, and then comes up missing in May. So he wasn't there very long.
Right. Yeah.
And for long hours, but he really he did well. I guess he just, he was clean cut, had a good personality, so he was pretty successful. He was kind of worried that he might get laid off because it had been slow. But then, like Greg said, on that weekend, he had sold a couple cars. So then he was real happy about that.
Okay, and you should know, I don't think either of you know this, I was actually back in the 90s, I was also a car salesman. My family was in the car business in my hometown of Leechburg, Pennsylvania. So I know that profession pretty well. I know the business, although it's been years and years and years. But my family was in the car business for like over 60 years. So I'm very familiar with, what the grind that is car selling. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to be fairly aggressive. It's very competitive. High pressure situation. So I can certainly, I know what that's all about. Sure. So he's doing that for 6 weeks, but it sounds to me like it sounds like he was a better salesman than I was, I guess is what I'm saying. So, okay. So he was doing that. And that was right in your town there of Wichita Falls, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's move back. Thank you for that. Of course, we're going to come back to that in a little bit because of the Mustang. Let's talk about, just want to ask you something about, this apartment that where he and his fiancee were going to live together, and he had been living in by himself for approximately, beginning of April until he went missing. Did he ever talk about having any problems there? I've lived in enough apartment complexes in my life. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. You can have bad neighbors, loud neighbors, drunk neighbors. How did it go, him living in that complex? Have you ever heard of any problems that he ever had with anybody there?
Well, as far as him saying anything, having a problem, no. We had, after he came up missing, the neighbor contacted the police, and then anyway, make a long story short, we talked to her, and she thought it was him, that he had problem with somebody at the mailbox. But we're not sure that was even him or anything like that. But that's what the neighbor had said.
Okay.
She said she recognized Keith as a tenant there, but she didn't recognize the other person. It was a male, about the same size as Keith. But she could tell that there was something going on. They seemed like, they may even get into a fight.
Wow.
And she was on her way, like I said, the mailboxes and the laundry room was like right close by each other. So she was on her way to the laundry room. So she kind of just went around them, went into the laundry room, and then when she came back, they were gone. But she just felt like, that was kind of unusual, after finding out about Keith's disappearance. And,
yeah, of course.
She thought that may, mean something. But we never did really identify who the other person was, or what the argument was about or anything like that. But, she felt like, it was pretty serious between them. She could just feel that, that negative energy between them.
Okay, so, but
also, now that you're talking about this, I think someone had also said that the week of his disappearance, a weekend, that they heard some loud thumps in his apartment, like somebody's hitting something up against a wall or something like that.
Okay.
I don't remember who said that.
It was the next door neighbor. Oh. Yeah, it was like the neighbor directly across from his. There was only two up there in his little area. And she said that she had heard, like late at night, like it sounded like somebody bumping up against the wall.
Yeah.
But she wasn't quite sure which date it was. So.
Okay. And just to be clear, I want to just make clear something you said a couple minutes ago. This other person, if this happened in this mailroom, this person has never been identified. So, for example, the police have never asked her to walk through the complex and try to scope out who this other person might have been.
No, not that I know of. I mean, she called it into the police department. I'm not sure how it was checked out by them. I don't know. Okay.
All right. So we have to remember that. So there is this witness. Of course, the listeners know sometimes, a lot of times witnesses get things wrong, but it's noteworthy. And of course, if we're to believe that he was at his apartment complex that night, as we're going to talk about those other people here in a moment, then maybe this is something that's noteworthy. But it's also noteworthy that you don't know who this other person is who Keith had a disagreement with or whatever. And it seems like this woman who noticed this never went about trying to figure out who it is either, because she's never told you about it. All right.
Well, I called her a while back. You know, we found her number. She doesn't live in Wichita Falls. She was military. And I called her a while back, and I don't think she really wanted to get involved too much in the matter anymore. So she didn't really say too much to me about that. And then also Keith lived in the back of the apartments. We always thought the mailboxes were right there by his apartment, but the mailboxes and the laundromat were in the front of that complex. So I always thought it was right there, but it was in front of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on to this. I just have in the outline, I just call them the mudding, quote unquote, the mudding friends. And I will start with this. How did Keith know this man and woman? I guess they were, I don't know if they were married, but they were at least a couple. How did Keith know them?
Well, Keith worked with the guy at the car place.
Okay.
He ran with him. I mean, he only knew him 6 weeks, but that was his fiancee, the guy that was with Keith. It was him and her and Keith, the three of them. And there's some discrepancies on what happened that night.
Well, we'll get into the discrepancies. I'm just interested in knowing how he knew them, and of course, it doesn't sound like it was for a long time, just 6 weeks. And of course, I have to ask. I mean, it's only 6 weeks, but have you ever heard of him having any problems with them?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Had Keith ever gone mudding, this was some of the listeners were like, well, what's that? You take a big truck, four-wheel drive truck, you go out in these back roads, dirt paths, and, muddy trails and things like that, riding around. Had Keith ever done that before, or was that the first time he had ever done this?
Well, see, that's the problem. We had thought all this time that he did go mudding, but then when the detective was over here reading the police report, it changed. It wasn't actually mudding so much, I don't think.
And what was it? What was it?
We were getting it wrong to begin with, because that's what Chris had told us when he was over here after Keith disappeared. He said they went to the convenience store and then to McDonald's, and then they went out mudding for a while, and then they went to the car wash. Well, when the detective was reading Chris's statement, it turned out to be different than what we were told, and we always thought it was that way, but that's not what happened.
So let me just ask you point blank then. Are you saying they didn't go muddy? This was not a mudding situation. They went and did something else.
I don't think so.
Well, if they did, it was a lot shorter time than what we thought.
Okay.
Because it's like we got the parent version, the short version of what actually happened. And we found out later that they actually, they drove around quite a bit. They drove out by the lake, trying to find a party, or actually did find a party to go to. Then came back, turned around, came back, and was, sounded like looking for another party. And then they did mention, driving around, where it was muddy, down some dirt roads and stuff, but it wasn't like what we were imagining, like you said, like, donuts, being out there for 45 minutes, an hour, or something like that.
Right.
And we were saying that for years.
Yeah.
We thought for years because Chris was over here, and that's what he was telling us. So we went with that. And then when the detective was over here and reading Chris's statement, it changed. I mean, it went from they went to the convenience store, and McDonald's was never mentioned. Then they went to another liquor store, and then they were going down alleys looking for parties. And then
when did you find it? I need to ask. When did you find this out? This discrepancy?
Oh man,
Probably about 4 years ago.
Wow, that long.
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, we can't get a hold of the police reports. We've tried to do that too, and I'm talking about recently. We had filed, or not us per se, but anyway, they had filed something to let us look at those police reports, and if we could look at them, we probably could figure out a lot of things as well. And my wife is good at catching stuff. So am I, but we can't see the police reports. We have no idea what was said.
That's very common. All right, so most importantly, what we've established here is this mudding story. This wasn't the main concern that night. That was just one small concern of many ventures that night, many adventures that night.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. People can judge that.
And also,
please.
I was going to say, and what we couldn't quite figure out is, it had rained. I mean, we had
Flood.
yeah, it was like
Much.
flooded, the Thursday and maybe Friday. So any area you would have went to would have been pretty, saturated. So we couldn't figure out, well, why would they take a company car? It wasn't his own vehicle. He had checked it out from the dealership, a demo car. So why would you take, a vehicle that's not yours, risk getting it stuck, getting damaged, or, you're going to have all this mud all over it. So, like I said, we imagine them out there having a good time, for an hour or so. So we imagine the whole thing would have been just covered with mud and underneath and all that. But I don't think it wasn't the case. So it was, sure, it probably had some mud on it, but not like what we were thinking. So they still did go to a car wash to clean it off, just because, he would be turning it in on Monday and it needed to be cleaned.
So to be clear, this truck that they were in mudding, that wasn't Chris's truck. That was the dealership's truck.
That was the dealership.
Right.
Wow.
It was a Pathfinder.
Pathfinder.
The truck is a Pathfinder.
All right, it was a US SUV. All right, thank you for explaining that. All right, that's the first time I've heard that. Let's move on to this. Now, of course, the Mustang, which also was not Keith's, that was also taken, was one of the dealership cars. I think we need to really understand this. And that is, of course, the car was eventually found at this church, which is right near where you two at least lived at the time. Do you even remember why Keith started parking, when he would come over to see you, started parking there in the church parking lot in the first place? Why didn't, of course, I've never been to your house. Why didn't he just park in your driveway or out along the street like you can in some neighborhoods? How did it come to be that the church became his own personal parking lot?
Okay, let me say something. We've lived in this house and we're still in it. We moved here in 1987. So anyway, we don't have that big of driveway.
Okay.
Keith, next door to us, was a church parsonage. Anyways, that's where he was parking at, next door, not in the church itself.
Okay.
When he could park over there, we asked the preacher at that time it'd be all right. He said, sure, no problem. Mm-hmm. So he parked there through in high school, I'd say 11th and 12th grade, maybe 12th grade. Well, at that time. Well, when he moved out, a new preacher had came into this church and had said that he didn't want no one parking there because the church van, they got a church van, it was going to start parking there. So I had told Keith not to be parking any of those cars over there anymore. The preacher doesn't want no cars over there.
Right.
Well, anyway, that car was found over there where he parked it. It would have been, I guess, Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it sat till they came and got it.
All right. So he had been parking there, whatever car he had at the time. He had been parking over there for at least a few years, of course, with the prior pastor's, preacher's permission. And then the new guy comes in and says, I'm not cool with that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they needed the space now. So they asked us not to park over there any longer. Okay. And he knew that. But I was thinking, if it's in the middle of the night,
well, I don't want to get into too much theorizing here, Deborah. If we could, I just wanted to stick to the facts. We can visualize what might have happened, what might not have happened. I really just want to stick to the facts right at this point.
Also, the detectives had told us through Crime Stoppers and all that they didn't want us to put out exactly where he parked at. Oh, so that's the reason they said at the church. Huh.
Okay.
It's next door was a parsonage, and then it was a Boy Scout hut, and now it's empty. It's been empty. The parsonage was there, and then next door to it's the church.
Okay.
So we live right by a church.
All right, and so this car then, when he was parking, it wasn't in the church parking lot. It was right next door. So it was in what, within 20, 30 yards of your house?
Yes.
Okay, it's like right there. So it's essentially like parking in your driveway.
Yes.
It's like that close.
It's that close.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's interesting. Now, of course, the important question is, when you look back at it now, how many people knew that Keith, over those however many years, 3 or 4 years, would park cars? When he would go to see you, would park next door. How many people knew that?
It would have been my wife, myself, his fiancee, the guy that's supposedly going to hire him at a construction place, and then Chris, the one he went out with the night he came up missing.
So how would have Chris known that?
Well, he picked him up when he was working at the job.
Okay.
He didn't have a loaner car at the first. I guess Chris had to be there longer than Keith, and he had a car, and they'd pick him up in the morning. So I picked him up over there.
All right. So it's a very limited number of people who,
right.
Being that the car was parked there, and we can be open to the idea that somebody else parked it there. Right. Maybe Keith parked it there. I'm not telling anybody what to think, but it's just a very small number of people, less than 10.
Correct.
Okay. Now, just some general questions regarding Keith, regarding that year of 1997. When you look back at it now, any concerns about Keith? Money problems with any people? Of course, any addictions, any mental health issues? Anything that pops up in those first 4 months of 1997 that maybe were catching your attention? That we're a little worried about our son. Anything like that?
Well, there was a point, like I said, when he was bouncing back and forth, we were kind of worried about him. And when he did come back to live with us here in would have been the first part of February, he had went out with a friend around his birth date, and they actually got arrested for drinking beer in a business parking lot.
Wow.
So he got like a minor in possession charge. But once he got the job, it just seemed like he was back on track. He just gotten engaged. He got the job. He got a new apartment. They were buying furniture. So no, he didn't really have a lot of money, just because, like I said, they were buying things for the apartment that they had to start from scratch. They had to buy everything for the apartment, furniture, pictures for the wall, all that kind of stuff. He was paying on the engagement ring. So no, he only had like $100 in savings. Probably, would have been the type to live paycheck to paycheck.
Huh.
So
Like most 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Not unusual.
So I wouldn't say, like I said, he was bad with money. He just, he just didn't make a lot at the time. And like I said, they weren't quite living together yet. She probably would have did pretty good at her job. So with the shared expenses, that would have helped quite a bit. And like I said, he did have his anxiety. And of course, he was depressed, after when college and baseball didn't work out. He was having a lot of, depression problems and things like that. So there was that time period, like I said, just right around his birthday. But then everything kind of just seemed to fall in place. And we were like, oh, okay, good. He's bouncing back. He's, he got all these things going for him. And, he likes his job. And, things are looking up for him. So that's why we were really kind of confused when all this happened. It's like, well, what could have happened? Why all of a sudden, things are going good, and then all of a sudden it just stopped, like, what in the world?
And what you said his birthday. What was the date of his birthday?
It's
February 19th.
Okay. So a couple, not quite 3 months before his disappearance. Okay. So certainly some issues, but I can't say that those issues are maybe unique to Keith. A lot of people have those issues, especially a lot of 20-year-olds.
Right.
Nothing that's really unique. Most 20-year-olds, live paycheck to paycheck and bump around from job to job, and they have dreams that don't quite come true, the way they had hoped. But nothing, at least to me, that what you two are saying that sounds unique.
Yeah.
Right.
When we got married, Debbie and myself, we lived paycheck to paycheck as well.
Mm-hmm.
Paying bills and stuff.
Right.
You're right.
Right. Now, I have to ask you this. I know this is a touchy question, but I in my job, I just have to ask it. Was there anything that you discovered about Keith after he disappeared that you didn't know about him before he disappeared? Anything, this is just an example. Like going through the apartment, taking his stuff out, anything. I know it's a very touchy question, and if you can't answer totally, then I understand that too, but I have to ask. Anything that, you found out about him that you didn't know beforehand?
Well, not really.
Mm-hmm.
When we emptied out the apartment, it was just, his baseball stuff, his personal items, all his clothes was left behind. So, we packed all that up. After about a couple of weeks, his fiance chose to go back with her parents. They picked her up, so she went back to El Paso. Mm-hmm. So when we packed it up, no, we didn't find anything, unusual or,
Okay.
There was no clues. There wasn't anything to go on. But the only thing I can really think of that we found out afterwards is we didn't know he was hanging around his old, high school friends.
Huh.
I think mainly during that month, well, we didn't see him much. When he had moved out in April and, we weren't seeing him on a daily basis, I guess he just, looked up all his old friends and had, a group of guys that he was hanging around with and partying with and stuff like that. And we're kind of naive, I guess. We thought, okay, he's working from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. You're going to be pretty tired. You're just going to go home and go to bed.
Yeah.
Repeat, the next day. So that's what we were thinking.
Yeah.
We didn't know he was going out at night, with these friends or, doing things with them and stuff. So that kind of surprised us.
Okay.
We just didn't know. We just thought he had a couple of work buddies, that he had met. But, we didn't really know about the reacquainted friends.
I have to be honest.
Can we back up a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had found something there. It was some numbers he had written down, and we talked to Carrie about them, and he told Carrie that if he won this bet, that they wouldn't have to pay rent for a while.
Wow.
So I thought that was kind of odd. Another thing, there was a phone call. It was on the answer machine. Sound like a woman, but I can't say it was a woman or a man.
Wow.
But they got the name wrong, and they had said that you better stay away from my wife or girlfriend or something like that. It was a threat.
On Keith's answering machine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they also used the name Kenneth, which when it first came out in the newspaper had gotten it wrong and had said Gregory Kenneth Mann was missing. Went by Kenneth or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So it could have just been a crank call.
Crank call.
Somebody put the pieces together and all that, or it could be a wrong number, or could be something else.
But see, the phone was not in Keith's name; it was in Carrie's name. That's what was strange to me.
That is
Her
strange.
name was mentioned in the very beginning in the newspaper.
That is
They
strange.
could have just looked it up.
Yeah, it is strange.
Yeah.
What did I have to ask? What did Keith's fiancee say about this when this was discovered? Of course, we're going to get to the disappearance and things that were discovered after. But being that you brought it up, what did she have to say about that?
What did she say?
About which part?
About on the answering machine, there's this "stay away from my girlfriend, my wife."
Yeah.
She's the fiancee of Keith. I mean, she certainly I would think, would have an opinion on that.
Well, yeah, but it was so weird though, because it sounded like somebody was trying to disguise their voice.
Yeah, it did.
So we couldn't tell, was it a man, was it a woman, what was going on. So it just, we just thought that was really strange, but we didn't put a lot of thought into it, just thinking maybe it's the wrong number, because they're not saying Keith specifically. So we just weren't sure, did it mean anything? Was it just the wrong number and, had nothing to do with Keith? We didn't know.
Regarding this bet, did you ever find out what the bet was? Of course, in May, maybe where no football's being played. Of course, I guess the NBA would be happening, NHL. Did you ever get an idea of what this bet could have been on?
Yeah, I went out to his job and I talked to an older guy, and he had said that they did football and basketball bets, but it was small amounts.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing major or anything like that.
Just like the pop.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was for the NBA. It was for the playoffs. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, but he had mentioned to Carrie that, well, if I win this, we won't have to worry about rent for a few months.
That doesn't
So
sound
the
like a
rent-
small bet to me.
Yeah,
That one does not, yeah, because their rent, I believe, was about $500, if I'm not mistaken. So, 3 months worth, that's $1,500. So, back then, yeah, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, that's not a small bet, unless it's some sort of long shot that he's putting $2 on some long shot. That's like the odds are very, very high or low. Improbable that's going to happen. Okay. So those are a couple things. Not sure what to make of it. But once again, I don't think it's unusual that 20-year-olds might be betting on games or anything either. But of course, when we get into that, and then we start talking about bookies and we start talking about people maybe are on the fringes of the law. It's something to consider. All right, let's move on to that day, May 10th, 1997. Just go through the timeline. What was Keith's day? We've already talked about the mudding, but what went on before that day? He worked, I guess. What went on?
Yes, I think he went in probably about 9 that morning and worked till about 6. We're not quite sure what he did between like 6 and 8, but then it kind of comes back up that his co-worker and his fiance was at Keith's apartment probably about like 8:30 for about an hour. I guess they're just visiting there. Carrie had actually called Keith about 9:30, and she was in Dallas with her family, doing some sightseeing, celebrating her graduation. and she was telling them different things. They went to Six Flags, or I don't know, did different things. And she remembers hearing Chris and Michelle like in the background of the conversation. So we know they're in the apartment at that time.
Okay. Then, of course, we've already talked about the mudding. We're not sure. Maybe it was just a little mudding, maybe. They were driving around, and what is that couple's, of course, we've just used, I think, Chris's first name. I don't think we need to get into last names here. Yeah. But the couple, what is the couple's story for the end of that night?
Can we back up just a minute also?
Yeah, go ahead.
This when this all started, we had a private investigator from our church that went and talked to some people, or talked to the Chris and them. Mm-hmm. Well, from my understanding, Keith was saying while they were out driving around that he was going to meet somebody at midnight.
Okay.
12:15. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this part didn't come up in Chris's statement. What happened was at the car wash, it was mentioned then that Keith had someone to meet. Well, it threw me off for the longest time. One of the detectives that was investigating it, and I kept asking him, what's the deal on this? I'm hearing he was out riding around, and then at the car wash it changes on that. Well, come to find out, Chris never told us about a pager. Anyways, supposedly Keith had a pager.
All right.
And anyways, to verify, they got to make sure it's right and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, and when Chris was over here through that week when it first happened, he never mentioned any pager to us. So we were in the understanding, that's another problem, that he had no pager. Back then, cell phones and all that were probably just coming out. But if he had a pager at that time, how come we didn't find out about this pager 20 years later after his disappearance? That's baffled me too.
All right, so this is once again one more thing you found out about him after he went missing.
After he went missing.
All right, so we have that. Of course, the message on the phone, on the machine. We have the writing down, maybe betting numbers or something like that, and we also have this pager that pops into the story 20 years later.
Yeah, 20 years
okay.
later.
Well, I'll ask you about that pager. Is this a pager that he?
If he would have said something about this pager in the beginning, we could have got the police on it to where we found out who it was with and the phone number, and found out who paid him and all that kind of stuff. Why wasn't that brought up?
I don't know. Was this a pager that Keith got himself, or was this a pager that he had because of his job at the dealership, or what?
No, it wasn't because of his job. We checked all that out. He didn't have to have a pager. They didn't have him a pager at his job. It would have been before this job, I assume.
Yeah. Well, and we're not 100% sure either. The question to Chris was, how did you know Keith had this meeting or something like that? And he said, well, I guess he got a call on a cell phone or something like that. And they were like, well, no, he didn't have a cell phone. Then he said, well, it must have been a pager.
All right.
So we verified it was.
All right, so I have to ask, the fiancee, did she know that Keith had a pager?
Are you talking about Chris's or?
No, I'm sorry.
Keith?
Did Keith's fiance know that Keith had a pager?
I don't believe so. I think she.
All right. So if he had one, he was hiding it from her.
Yeah, possibly, yes.
Okay, well,
And
that's not usually a good sign. Okay.
right, and it's pretty hard. Like I said, 27 years later,
Mm-hmm.
She actually stayed with us for a good week and a half after he came up missing. She didn't want to stay in the apartment by herself, so she stayed here with us. And I know we talked a lot and we asked a lot of questions, but we didn't have the smarts to write it all down. We thought, okay, we didn't think it was going to last very long anyway. So, of course, we're thinking, we're going to remember all this information. And so since it's not written down, we've lost a lot of the knowledge that we had from back then, anything that she had told us. So, yeah, and it's hard to go back now. We haven't had any contact with her after probably the first 6 months, maybe.
Because she won't write or call back. We've tried.
Wow.
Well, we have attempted to get a hold of her, but
nothing.
Her parents wanted her to move on, and she did. About 9 months later, she got married.
Wow, that fast.
She has a couple of kids.
Her mom told me to quit bothering her. I told her, if your daughter was missing, I would be trying to help you find her. But she just flat told me, quit calling her. She doesn't want to be bothered anymore, and hung up on me.
And we would try to just ask her questions because we,
Sure.
Carrie would be the one to know certain things. And so we would, if we thought of something, we would try to call her and find out some things. But unfortunately, it just kind of ended, and we haven't had any contact with her over the years.
Okay.
And we were hoping, once she got older and, that maybe she would try to get a hold of us, and it just hasn't happened.
My wife has wrote her letters, and I know my wife knows how to get a hold of people and addresses and all that. None of this stuff has ever returned to us either, returned to sender. So
Okay. Let's get back to that. Let's get back to that night then. So, what is the story for that night? What do these two, Chris and his fiance, what do they say about the end of that night?
Well, after they were at the car wash, cleaned off the vehicle, and it was just very close by Keith's apartment, so they just dropped him off about 11:45. They saw him walk up the stairs, but either didn't wait to see him go into the apartment, or just because of the angle couldn't quite see him go in. So they never saw him go in. They assumed he went in because, we found the beer bottles that he had taken with him. They were inside on the counter.
Okay.
So it's assumed that he got inside. But no one witnessed him going all the way inside the apartment.
But why wouldn't you put your beer bottles in the refrigerator? They were on the counter when we went over there the next day.
Okay.
Two of them full, one of them half drank. That makes no sense to me either. But then again, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm.
Yeah, let's not look into these things too deeply. I just want the cold hard facts here. These things can be interpreted in many different ways.
I know.
But they say they dropped him off and they drove away and never saw him again. That's what they say.
Never saw him again, and the car's parked over here the next morning.
Okay.
Yeah, his car at the complex that he had from the car dealership was found over here, right where he parked during high school days, which he knew he wasn't supposed to park there.
Okay. Now, just to be, once again, I realize people are maybe going to be suspicious of Chris and his fiancée. Is that really what happened? But just to be clear, their story, and no part in their story did they ever say Keith said he was meeting Jane Doe or he was meeting John Smith. He never said who he was meeting at 12:15 a.m.
From what Chris had said, he just smiled when Chris asked him. So Chris assumed it was a female.
Okay. All right.
Now, Chris did take a polygraph test and passed.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so that's the story, and they're sticking to it. What? Of course, we go into the next day. Of course, May 11th, 1997. And when you got up that day, did you see that red Mustang sitting there? And did you know that your son had been driving it? Did that all come together, or what?
I get up early in the morning, always have. Went outside, saw the car to my left. I thought nothing of it. It was church day. To get the paper, came back in, and that was it till we went to church. Later on, and then my wife, when we walked outside, she kind of gasped, like, what's that car doing there? But for me, I never really thought anything at first.
And I had seen him in that particular car. I knew right away, I knew it was a Ron Roberts Ford car, and I knew it was one he had driven before. And it just really startled me to see it there, and knowing that it shouldn't be there. But then I thought, well, maybe somebody at the church is test driving it. There's a logical explanation. So we really didn't put a lot of thought into it at 10 in the morning when we're going to our church. Well, when we come back at a little after 12, and it's still sitting there, and all the other cars from that church, they're all gone. So this is the only car around. Then I'm starting to think, well, that's kind of odd. It shouldn't still be here. And then Carrie called about 1 o'clock and said she had just gotten into town. She was supposed to come in about 2, is what she had told Keith, but came in about an hour early. And she couldn't find him. He wasn't at the apartment. To her, it didn't look like he had slept in the bed. His work clothes were just, kind of laying there. So she wondered if maybe he was over here. We had plans. They were going to come over later that afternoon.
Mother's Day.
Yeah, it was Mother's Day, so they were going to come over, had some gifts, and she thought, well, maybe Keith came over here early or something. But we said no. Last time we had seen him was after the graduation, at the dinner. That was the last time, and hadn't had any contact with him after that. So she just said, okay, let me know if you hear from him. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, let me look to see if that car is still out there. And sure enough, it was. So I called her back and I said, well, there's this red Mustang from Ron Roberts over here, and I think that's the car Keith was driving. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to wait because he's got to come back, for that car. And she came over and, we just sat here and waited and, kind of tried not to be too worried at first.
Right, of course.
Thinking, and Greg really wasn't worried at all. He was like, no, he probably just went off with some buddies to the lake and maybe they had car trouble. Cell phones weren't, really a thing just yet. Maybe around here. I know in other states and stuff people said, oh, I had a cell phone. But his group, that age group, really didn't have them. So there was no way to get a hold of him.
Okay, so the car is sitting there.
Also, when that afternoon before Carrie, or maybe after Carrie called, it was after church, we walked over to that car, and the car was locked up, but the trunk on that car.
Yeah, we're gonna get.
You could lift it up. So I lifted up the lid on the trunk, and the panel on the left side was pushed out, like someone had got something out of there, and I just shut it back down, and then the car just sat there.
Okay. All right. I want to get more specific into that in a little bit. Being that you live right next to door there, I guess you didn't hear that car come in there that night. I mean, has anybody been able to ever determine at what time that car was parked there?
Well, actually, our daughter heard it. Her bedroom is very close by. I was actually with her. We were sitting up talking. She's a preteen, so, we're talking about things, it was about midnight that I told her, I said, well, there's church tomorrow. Let's just, go ahead and go to bed, whatever. So I left the room. And she said she heard a noise about around 1, maybe 1:15. Something, she knew it was a car was there.
Mm-hmm.
But being she's 12, going on 13, she just, was kind of afraid to look out the window or whatever. She just didn't really think about it. She just got up, used the restroom, went back to bed. Didn't think anything of it. So we know it was there, like I said, approximately about 1:15 in the morning.
Okay.
I wish I had still been in her room. If I had heard it, I would have known something was up.
Right.
Somebody shouldn't be parking there, not at 1:15 in the morning. Now maybe, a neighbor might park there for a few minutes during the day or something, but not at 1:15. So I definitely would have looked out. I wish I could have. So we'd have known at least that part of the puzzle. We would have known, did he drive it there? Did somebody else drive it there? Did he walk off? Did he get picked up by somebody? Those answers, we would have.
Okay, so it's far, where, of course, that's not definite scientific hard proof that that's when the car was put there, but it's a possibility that this car was parked there, not, maybe an hour and a half after Chris and his fiancée say they dropped Keith off at his apartment.
Correct.
Right around there. Okay, and how far is it from where you lived to, or live, I guess now, to where Keith was living at the time? How far is that?
It's about 2 to 3 miles.
No, pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close, and it's a pretty straight shot. Just right, we have a busy street, Southwest Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like I said, a straight shot there, and then his apartments are, really nearby. So,
Okay.
doesn't take very long at all.
Okay. Now, you did say, I think, that the fiancé went over to their apartment actually that day. The day after he goes missing, or maybe the same day if he went missing early on that day. The 11th. Did she say, we already talked about the beer bottles, but we'll get into the specifics. But anything that jumped out to her that was unusual? She's the first person in there after Keith goes missing. Just the overall look of the apartment. Did it look like there was any violence? Any lights left on? Anything, like that struck her just in general?
Can I add something to this?
Yeah.
When she was coming in, she told Debbie that she had a premonition that Keith wasn't going to be there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We don't do feelings and psychics and things here, but maybe that's noteworthy. Yeah. Maybe given that she knows Keith, maybe it was something maybe subconscious or something.
Right.
But walking in there, I guess the apartment was locked.
Yes.
Anything unusual about the overall scene that she?
No, everything was fine. It didn't look like, there hadn't been a fight, no overturned furniture, nothing, Now, they were in the process of like hanging up pictures, those were still like down on the ground, boxes of their belongings. The only thing unusual, I would say, was that she could tell he had not slept there that night, and she could tell just right away.
Okay, that's noteworthy. So when do the police get involved? Of course, his car is right there, and something's not right. That's the car he was driving. Of course, he didn't come over to your house or anything. How do the police get involved? What do they do?
Monday morning. I'll let Debbie answer that, but it was Monday we had called, or she had called, but I'll let her start how it happened.
Well, Carrie had actually tried Sunday night to report him missing, but they told her, well, it hasn't been long enough, give us some more time. So then when he wasn't back, Monday morning, Greg called about 7 in the morning and spoke to dispatch or whatever. And they had sent out a motorcycle cop at that time he came by. He saw the Mustang over here, and I happened to be out front because we lived kind of across catty corner to an elementary school. So I was watching my girls walk over to school, and I see this motorcycle cop. He comes up and asks me if I know who owns the car or who it belongs to or whatever. And I'm like, yes, I do know. And why do you want to know? I mean, are you here for the missing person report? And he's like, no, that's some people up the road, but this car is connected to that. And I'm like, no, it's us that called it in. And, we know who it belongs to. Our son was driving it, and, now we can't find him. And he just kind of nonchalant, like, well, I looked at the car. There's, nothing, no sign of, a crime, nothing to say, what happened. He's like, don't worry about it. Young kids, they do this all the time. He'll come back, in a day or two or whatever. You're worrying too much, too soon. He's like, wait a little bit. I was like, okay. Well, then Tuesday, Greg actually went down to the police station. He's like, no, there's something going on. He would have been back already. This is not right. This is very unusual. And so then they put some detectives on it that Tuesday. And then they went down. By then, the car had already been taken back to the dealership. So then they went and checked it out there. But by then, it had already been detailed out, cleaned up, put back on the lot. Yeah. And then it was sold like after 2 weeks.
But it was already clean. When we looked inside, it was already clean.
When you saw it over there next door, in your opinion, it was already clean.
It was.
Yeah,
okay.
And there was nothing inside. And
when the locksmith came out and opened the car up, it didn't take him no time at all to get in that car. Mm-hmm. I mean, he let me in it. I mean, and there was like maybe a cassette tape or something like that, and that was it. I mean, it was cleaned up. It was already clean. But anyway, that's
okay. And of course, that could have been done at the dealership, right? Is that possible that the car was detailed and then Keith takes it out?
I don't know. He was driving it, and whoever put it over here, we never got into it because it wasn't opened up. But I have no idea on any of that.
Okay. What about searches? I don't know necessarily what you were thinking at the time. I can certainly ask you. Were you thinking that it was Keith who put the car there, or just that knee-jerk reaction of that day, or did you think it was somebody else?
Debbie thought that he drove it there. I did not.
Okay. Any searches done? Of course, now we're starting to get into this is a missing persons case. Any searches done around your area? I really don't know what, do you have woods around your area? Do you have bodies of water around where you live? Any searches done in that immediate area for Keith?
Well, there was just small scale searches, and just by family members and some close friends of ours, we would go out looking. They weren't these big searches like you see now, like where they have the grid maps and they, they check off all the different areas that's been searched. There wasn't anything like that. And plus, there just really wasn't a specific area to say this was, where he might have gone or might be or something like that. So it was kind of difficult to kind of pinpoint an area. We kind of concentrated on the southwest part of Wichita Falls, and we would go out we've got a lot of just land out there with, mesquite trees and things like that. And we would just go searching. And, of course, we were hoping not to come across,
right.
But we were hoping to find, like, his wallet has never been found. He was wearing a baseball cap that night. Just hoping to find something, some kind of clue, so that we could go back to the police and say, hey, look in this area. And They did do some searches in different areas, when things come up, but it just wasn't like it is now when you see, these big massive
Right.
searches that, 300 people are out, looking
Okay.
and all that. It was just a different time back then. And we weren't 100% sure that he didn't maybe just take off on his own. Greg had that gut feeling that something bad had happened, but I was still pretty hoping, pretty positive, at least for the first 6 months to a year that, maybe he had some kind of mental breakdown or, something just caused him to leave without telling anybody. But after so long, that just didn't sound logical after a while. But, all these other theories that we've heard, that didn't really sound true either. It was like, it just seemed like, yeah, you see it in movies and stuff like that, but that's not going to happen, to our family or whatever, or to Keith. So it just was kind of hard in the very beginning because, like I said, maybe we did push as hard for certain things to happen just because we didn't know and we didn't want to be accusing anybody of doing anything when we didn't have any facts. So it was pretty difficult that first year especially.
Also, I can tell you that our police department here in Wichita Falls have done a lot. Here within the last 5 years, they dug up a business that was there and thought possibly he was buried under concrete. And they still, to this day, think he is buried under concrete somewhere.
Yeah. That's been the main rumor throughout the years. Of course, different locations have been mentioned, but they feel like there's always kind of a grain of truth in rumors. And since he hasn't been found easily, that could be the case, that he is buried under concrete and it may never be found.
We want to just stay away too much from the theorizing and everything. We really try to stay away from that stuff. Here's what I will ask you. You did offer a reward. Any tips that you got that sounded, hopeful? Of course, the case is still unsolved. But any offered a reward? Any generate any decent tips that sounded believable?
Well, if there were, we've had maybe a few come to us, but it had to be through the police department or Crime Stopper.
And a lot of times it's repeat information. And generally it's stuff that the police already know, have already checked out, have already ruled out. So no, unfortunately, the reward has not been an incentive. And there was even on the 25th anniversary, Crime Stoppers had upped the reward to $25,000 just for some information.
Dead or alive.
Right, and nothing.
Anything.
Nothing came about concrete.
And also, I'd like to say, Debbie goes on to missing people and things like that. She had found somebody that had been missing for a long time, and they were like in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling her at first, no, that's not Keith. And then I started looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I thought it was him, possibly. Anyways, make a long story short, the detective contacted missing person somewhere, and then anyway, they got somebody to go into Mexico and get a DNA test from this homeless guy. And it turned out not to be him, but it took us over a year, maybe longer than that. Was it over a year? Wasn't it?
I think so.
Maybe 2 years to find out if it was him or not, but it was not him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they did something.
Yeah, they did a lot. They're doing a lot. And the detective that's on it now, he said they're at kind of like a stopping point. I mean, not unless something gets called in, they don't know what else to do really either.
Yeah, we might call it dead end.
Right, and we also we lucked out in, it was like 2002, that there was through the Texas Rangers and the Texas Department of Public Safety investigator. They worked on Keith's case for like a solid year.
Full time.
It was like a grant, and it was called Project Find Me, and they only chose like, I think it was like 20 cases, and we lucked out that Keith was one of the ones that they chose. And so they went back, from the very beginning, talked to all the people, tried to get more names of people to talk to, and a lot of the things were investigated, pretty heavily, just because they had the time, and things were looked into. So that was pretty good. They actually found the car, the red Mustang. They tracked it down. It was in the Dallas, Fort Worth area, and they were able to do some forensic testing on it.
Pulled everything out of it, all the seats and all that.
Sent it off, but came back negative. There wasn't anything on there to help out.
So they went over it with a fine tooth comb, is what they had said. And also, I would like to add that if it hadn't been for my wife, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be get done. She gets on the computer and does this stuff and all that, just like with this what she was just telling you about. That's the way we got it. She's the one that got through and got it done. So
okay,
luckily,
good job, Deborah. Good job.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard, and we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning.
Everybody does. Yeah, everybody does.
Well,
I keep telling her.
Well, we were in shock, really. We couldn't believe this was happening. And, I wish I had a big, huge notebook written down of everything people had told us, all the conversations we had with people. But we just honestly didn't think it was going to last, 6 months to a year. So we just didn't think to do all that kind of stuff. And, we could have taken pictures of the car that's right next door. You just,
At this particular time, I had the bus station here, and I knew all the taxi drivers. Airport here closed up at midnight. I know all the drivers, the buses coming through at night and all that. We checked all that out to see if he got on a bus or took a taxi out of town or something like that. Nothing. So for him to leave just because, let's say he didn't want to get married or something like that, I don't think so.
Okay.
For him to leave all his clothes and his paychecks and all that, and I know how my son was. He would want that money. He was, he needed it.
Yeah, of course.
So for him to just take off, and I kept telling Debbie that when we would walk around the school every morning, I'd tell her, Debbie, he didn't take off. Why would he? And she would say, well, maybe he didn't want to get married and this. And I said, Debbie, he would have showed back up. I know my son. He would have went down to his mother's in New Mexico. He would have came here. I mean, if he was gone, it would have been maybe for a day or so. Like I said, he'd be down at the lake or something partying, or he would have came back. Okay. So, and he's missing now 27 and a half years.
Yep.
So I know, as far as him taking off and changes in identity and all that kind of stuff, no, I don't think so.
All right. Let's move on to some of these details. Of course, we've gone over a lot of things. We need to get deeper into some of these details. So to make sure people understand things about the car and some of these other points. I want to go to, of course, Chris and his fiancee first. You've already stated, that Chris got the idea. Once again, if we want to believe him and we want to believe his fiancee, nobody has to believe them. Nobody has to not believe them. That there was a belief, I guess, that maybe Keith was planning to meet a woman that night, although there's no proof of that, but that was an idea that Chris said he got. And you already stated also that Chris passed a polygraph test for that night, being asked questions about that night. But at the time, would you say, in your opinion, back in 1997, were Chris and his fiancée helpful? How did they react to when they found out that Keith was missing? What can you say about their initial reactions and their initial help with police?
Well, his fiance, I don't know nothing about her. I don't know her. Chris was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
My wife watches started watching a lot of missing person shows, and she was telling me it's generally the last people that's seen with that person. But anyways, when he came over here, I was telling her, I said, the way he was acting, I thought, nah, it's not him, you know. He had nothing to do with it. But my wife is the one that kind of drove me to that, about the questions and all that, how they were, when they would ask him questions, how precise he was to everything. So that just, it made me wonder. I mean, you know, at first, no, I thought Chris had nothing to do with this.
Okay, but your opinion, once again, there's no proof either way, but your opinion has changed since 1997?
Yeah, I mean, instead of me focusing on somebody, like they're telling me I was having tunnel vision, it made me go into the broad scope of other things, and it could be. I mean, we've gone into 15 or 20 different scenarios that could have happened to my son that night, and we really don't know any of them is true. You could come up with anybody being at fault if you really look into it. I mean, just look it to that way and then the other way, and then go a different direction and think it happened that way and stuff. I mean, we need something else. We need somebody to talk and all. That's what we need.
All right. So I just want to be really, really focused here, though. They were forthcoming. They talked to the police. They weren't evasive. They didn't lawyer up. Nothing like that.
No,
Right.
nothing like
And
that.
Okay.
like I said, Chris was very helpful. You know, he came over to do a TV interview. He was trying to get the Mustang so that we could do a reenactment piece, but that request was turned down. He, was always, willing to be interviewed by the different detectives over the years, and polygraph. So, they just seemed, and we didn't know him at all. We'd only really met him maybe once or twice during that first week. I can't really remember having a lot of interaction with them. What would happen is Carrie knew them a little bit better, so we would ask her questions. She would call them up, try to find out the answers like that. So she was kind of like the go-between. So we really didn't have a lot of interaction with Chris and his fiance until, like I said, he did come over for that interview that he did.
Well, let me back up. Let me back up to something else. When he came up missing, when Carrie had called over there to find out if they knew where Keith was, this was Chris and his fiance. She was talking to the fiance and asking about Keith and all. And I guess her and Chris were in a fight or been in a fight or something, and was saying, I'll just go where Keith is at. So it made me wonder, where's Keith at? And this is after Keith's disappearance. So there's just little things like that came up also.
Okay.
And the police did ask him about that, and what did he say? What was the answer on that?
He just said he was joking around, kidding around about it.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything.
It's not an uncommon thing for people to say in disappearances. Certainly something, you think about, but, we have a lot of situations where people say, things like that, and they have nothing to do with the disappearance.
But you have to be in this situation to feel and understand what we've gone through and what we're going through, And I know someone has to know where my son is or what happened to him. And, when you start talking to somebody and just like focusing in on them, they're not telling me the truth, and then another person you talk to, they're not telling, you want to think that they had something to do with it.
Sure.
And really they did not, but it's been the hardest thing for us. We're stuck in 1997 still. And these different companies have done age photographs, pictures of my son where he looks, the age he's supposed to be, age progression. And they sent one, and I didn't even recognize him. I was telling the detective if I walked by him in the store, I wouldn't even know that's him. I still see him as 20 years old,
right?
Not 48 years old. He's fixing to be. So it's really difficult for us,
Yeah.
We're still
Greg, I get it. I really just want to stick with these facts if I could. We get, certainly.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure we cover, because it's the facts that are gonna, bring eventually this to a resolution. So I want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what these are. So let's move on.
I'm just trying to say how I feel,
Yeah.
You have to be in it to understand it.
I know.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. Let's move on to this. So let's move on to the car. You said before it was locked. Were the keys in it?
No, the keys have never been found.
Okay. How about the trunk? You of course said before you were the one that actually discovered that the trunk was open and that a panel on the left side was dislodged.
Yes, I was the one that opened it up. When you got out to the car, you could see the trunk was popped. You couldn't see it like from the house as you walked up to it, maybe 5 foot or so. Then you could tell it was popped. Like someone had got something out of it, I guess. That's what it looked like to me.
Okay. Has anybody at the dealership ever given an opinion on why that panel in the inside of the trunk was loose?
No.
None.
Nobody's ever said nothing to me about it.
Okay. Any proof that someone else other than, of course, I know you said eventually some forensics were done on the car, but years later. Any proof that someone else other than Keith had driven it?
Well, there's one thing. When the locksmith came and keyed the car to start it, took him a while to do all that. 2, 3, 4 hours. I don't remember. It was a long time to actually put a key in the ignition. And I went back out there and looked in it like I was telling you. And the seat was moved back. That was after. No, hold on. That was afterwards. When the salesman came to pick the car up, that's what it was. The salesman came to pick the car up, and I guess he was tall. He had called, or someone had called and made a comment that the seat was pushed back. So I called the locksmith, and I asked him, I said, "Did you move that seat?" He told me, "No, I never moved the seat because it was pushed back." But that's how I know it was pushed back.
Okay. All right. So, and how tall was Keith?
He was my size. He's about 5'7".
All right. So,
if that, I think he's 5'6" myself.
Okay. So, the average height of a guy is like 5'9", so he was shorter than the average.
Cool. That's right.
Okay. Any forensics? I guess you said eventually they were done, but at the time, any forensics done on the car?
No, they said by the time that they finally saw it that Tuesday, it had already been cleaned up. That I guess they didn't do anything at the time.
Okay. Overall, anything else that needs to be mentioned regarding the car? Anything that?
Just about. We don't know who parked it there. I just was going to say that, just like I told you before, I don't think he pulled it over here. Debbie thinks he did, but we don't know. Okay.
But then nothing, anything unusual about the car. I guess there was a cassette in the cassette player. Was it music that Keith would listen to?
Yes, I guess so.
Okay. All right. Let's. Of course, you had one of your daughters who said she might have heard something at 1:15. And we already went over how there are only so many people who could have known that Keith parked that car. And one of those people, though, is Chris. But it's a very small group.
Correct.
Okay. Let's move on to the apartment. Now we can talk about those beer bottles or beer cans there, Greg. You stated that there were beer bottles or cans in the apartment, one of them half drank. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, when we went in there the next day, which would have been, was it Sunday or Monday we went there? Monday, I think, wasn't it? Anyways, I can't remember if we went there Sunday or Monday. It was one of those days. We went into the apartment. The beer bottles were on the counter. There were 3 of them, and 2 of them was full, and 1 of them was half drunk. So, as far as anything else being out of place, I don't remember that.
Okay. What about the clothes that he was would have been wearing when he went out that night and came home? Were they there? Do we have any idea what he was wearing when he was out that night?
Yeah, we saw he was actually, they have him on the security tape at the very first convenience store that they went to, and he was wearing a kind of like a cream-colored long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, he had a beige baseball cap on. I've never come across those items, so we believe he was still wearing them. We had read in one of the police reports that, well, the detectives had seen some clothing with some, mud, a little bit of mud on the bottom of the hem. So, whether that was the clothes he was wearing, I don't think so. I think that was work clothes that were, like laying on the floor, something like that. So as far as we know, like I said, he was still wearing the same clothes that he had on at 10 o'clock.
Okay, because I had read somewhere that it's possible that the clothes from that night were found in this place, and in fact, they believe they were from that night because they might have had actual mud or something on them. That's not true?
Yeah, I can't say 100%. I just know that the report said they saw like just a little bit of mud on the bottom. But I believe, those, and I collected his clothes. I've got his work clothes for my couple of nights worth, and they were more like khakis. He wore like khaki pants and white long sleeve shirt. And I have those boxed up in case if they ever wanted to test them for anything or anything. But so, we never came across any jeans with mud on them or his shoes, anything like that. So,
okay.
And it doesn't sound like, he had a lot of time to come home, change, and, and
right.
Why would he? I mean, generally, and when you're mudding, you're in the vehicle. You're not outside the vehicle walking around in the mud.
Well,
so
that's true, but they also said they all got out of the truck to wash it.
Yeah.
And it's rare that you can wash a vehicle outside like that, unless they drove it through a drive-through, which I guess is possible. But if they did it the old-fashioned way, then you tend to get dirty or wet or something like that.
Yeah, so it is possible, but whether maybe if the police took those into evidence, I don't know. I've never heard that, and like I said, I never collected something like that. Like, I mean, we've had all his clothes, but they were, clean clothes in his closet, in the drawers, things like that. So, as far as I know, I've just all these years just assumed he was just wearing the same outfit that we saw him on the security cameras.
All right, so I guess what we're saying is if he was meeting somebody, it seems he went to meet that person or met that person. Maybe the person came over to his place in the same clothes that he was wearing out earlier that night. It seems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we believe.
Just a little bit more about the apartment. Anybody actually? Of course, we're just going by what Chris and his fiancee said. Anybody actually see Keith come home that night, or maybe even somebody see something suspicious going on around Keith's apartment maybe before he came home? Have you ever heard any information about that over the last 27 years?
Yes, the neighbor said they heard him leave but never come back.
All right. So we have, I guess, an ear witness. Allegedly heard something, not anything, I guess, unusual, but just him leaving.
Right. Well, they heard, loud music when they were leaving the apartment, but they never heard anything. And, you could say, well, maybe they were being considerate, turn the music down. And where he lived, his apartment, it was kind of like a small little, almost kind of like a cul-de-sac or something. And it was very crowded and hard to maneuver. So they may have even dropped him off just, to where Keith had to walk a little bit farther. And that could explain it. But yeah, the neighbor said that they never remember hearing him come back home.
Yeah.
And to our knowledge, they didn't hear him leave in the Mustang. It could be in the police reports. We don't know. Like I said, we don't know all the information from way back in 1997.
That's the reason we need to see the police reports.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was something called in about a month into it, so maybe probably like in June sometime. Someone had said that they thought they saw Keith talking to somebody in the parking lot about 12:30, 1 in the morning, something like that. And they gave a description, and so the detectives had called and asked us, does this sound familiar? Does this sound like one of Keith's friends or something like that? And we didn't think so. We said, no, we've never, known of anybody like that. But some friends of ours that were helping us, they're like, well, that sounds like somebody that works at Ron Roberts Ford. And so that was checked out, but they determined that it wasn't the same person. And
mechanic.
Yeah, and that the person that called it in was unreliable. So that kind of fizzled out.
All right. So that is the apartment. We got these beer bottles. It seems he seemingly brought them back inside, but that's the story. Maybe they were left there from before. Regarding, we've talked about the clothes, nothing unusual. The fiancee goes in there, really doesn't find anything unusual, except we can't forget that we've already talked about this message that was left, that, Kenneth, and, it might be a crank, being that that's the wrong number, the wrong name, it might be the wrong number. And then there were also some numbers, I guess, written on something, and there was an idea that did Keith have some bet or something going on, and of course he did say something to his fiancée about we might not have to pay the rent for a couple months because of this. Okay, let's move on to this. Speaking of the fiancée, being that you said she stayed with you for quite a while after this happened, in that time, I realize you've already said you've lost contact with her. You've tried to reach out to her over the years. She will not respond. At the time, did she ever offer an insight into what she thought happened to Keith? Did you ever offer up an opinion?
Well, it seemed like she was just more embarrassed about, like she felt like he dumped her and ran off, and then here she's stuck. Like I said, they just signed the 6-month lease. She was supposed to start her job on Monday, so she's in limbo. So it was just kind of a mixture of, I can't believe you did this to me, and, what am I supposed to do now? And so, but then, like Greg had mentioned earlier, but she said, well, I kind of had a feeling coming into town that he wasn't going to be here, and maybe something bad had happened to him. So, it's kind of goes both ways that, she was just as unsure as like I was. It's like, well, did he just get cold feet? Did he just take off, or did something bad happen to him? So it was just kind of hard to know at the time because, like I said, we didn't really have any facts to go on.
All right, so her initial reaction was he was the runaway groom.
Kind of, yes, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and now I'm stuck with all this responsibility. What am I going to do? So.
Did she end up living in that apartment or what?
No, like I said, I think she stayed just one night with a friend, but she did not really ever live there again. She decided, probably would have been, I think, closer to the end of May, her parents came up and we had rented a U-Haul for her, and we just loaded everything up, gave her, everything that they had just bought and all that. We just took Keith's personal things, and
who'd she stay with?
Cedar Falls.
You said a friend.
Yeah, what? Yes.
Who was that?
One of her friends spent the night one night, but they just didn't feel like it was safe since we didn't know what was going on.
I agree.
You know, right? So she stayed over here for, like I said, a good week and a half until she got picked up. So, and the apartment manager was real nice as far as returning the deposit. It wasn't much, but they just wrote out 2 checks to split between the two, and so luckily that part worked out.
Okay. Did she ever admit? No. I mean, of course, we already know there's this story about this pager. I don't, once again, I don't know if there's any proof. Did you ever find a bill in the apartment that he was paying for a pager?
No.
Nothing
No,
like.
nothing like that. Mm-mm.
But that was something that came up from Chris years later.
Yeah, Chris told the detective he had one.
Okay. But no bill, like you said, no bill inside nothing of any proof. And of course, his fiancee didn't seem to know about that. She never brought it up. And, I guess nobody's ever come forward to you all these years saying, yeah, I used to call Keith on his pager. Nobody's ever said anything like that.
Well, the only other one I was thinking about was maybe his mother had said something about that. When she picked him up at the airport one time, that he had a pager.
Oh, well, she would certainly be a believable source. Certainly.
Yeah.
Huh. So she's claiming she did see Keith with a pager.
That's what she told us.
Okay. And when would this have been? How long before the disappearance?
That would have been in January of '97.
All right, so 4 or 5 months before.
5 months. Yeah, 5
Okay.
months. Yeah.
Now I have to ask this regarding the fiance. Have you ever heard that maybe she had some ex-boyfriend who was still obsessed with her? And might not have liked the idea that she was engaged to another guy. Of course, this is a very common type of disappearance, very common type of foul play scenario. Exes getting involved in current relationships. Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, we never heard anything like that on her part. And they had dated, like I said, about a year and a half while they were both attending the college. So, I don't know
nothing
if
like
she
that.
would have had-
No,
nothing like that as far as on that end.
Okay. And we do have to remember they had been a couple, I guess, for a year and a half. And, it wasn't like this was just a new relationship. Hopefully people eventually move on. So, and then we have to figure out what are the odds that, why would Keith be meeting one of his fiance's, ex-boyfriends or something? That maybe doesn't make, why would he be doing that? That sounds kind of, doesn't sound very believable.
Right. And now there was a rumor on Keith's part. One of his friends had said something like, there was this girl that got mad that Keith was letting his fiance move in with him, which we thought, well, that's really odd, that, that's his fiance. Why wouldn't she, be moving in? So, but whether that was just a rumor or not, and we had heard possibly there was this one night stand that he might have had during, like, let's say, the month beforehand. So probably, like I said, that April when we didn't see him at all during that month, we have really no knowledge, what he was doing, who he was seeing, all that. So it's quite possible that was the same person that said that comment. We don't know. And like I said, there's just too many speculations and rumors.
A lot of stuff. You're right.
Yes.
Now let's talk a little bit more. That's, of course, the reason we're here is Keith. So let's talk a little bit more about him. I did read that he was actually, for his money situation, he was actually using his fiance's credit card. How did that come about?
Yeah, she had a FINA credit card, and he used it a couple of times that weekend. Like when we were with him at the graduation before we came back to Wichita Falls, he had to stop at the gas station and fill up the car, and he used her credit card there. So we had to find a FINA, and luckily we found one just right before they closed. And then when he went out with his friends and he getting some snacks, some things for the evening, maybe some cigarettes, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to use that again because he had no cash on him, and so they had to go to the local FINA station here, and he was able to use it. So he pretty much determined he did not have any cash on him. We know for a fact Friday night when we were with him he didn't have any, and then Saturday, his friend said no, he didn't have any cash on him at all, not even a quarter to make a phone call. So he was pretty cash poor that weekend.
Okay.
Until he got paid, Monday.
Okay. Well, how did that situation even come up that he's using her card? How long had he been doing that? Does anybody know?
Yeah, that I don't really have any knowledge of. I don't know if it's just, he was an authorized user on her card,
Mm-hmm.
and if he'd been using it all along. I really don't know that answer.
Okay. Let's get to once again more on his money situation. As you've already said, there was only $100 in his bank account, but as Greg talked about earlier, was there some sort of gambling thing going on here? And that is something that I have read that's been mentioned over the years. I don't know necessarily what to make of it, but being that you got to look at his apartment and maybe there were some bank statements lying around and everything. Did it look like there was what you were seeing and the money that he was making or had and everything didn't quite all go together? Meaning, could it be that he was wrapped up in some sort of gambling thing and was losing money and somebody might have wanted to call in a bet? Anything like that looking at his overall money situation?
But no, we didn't see anything like that. In fact, we did have a couple of his bank statements, and it just, looked like just regular, normal amounts deposited, and then every few days or once a week, looked like maybe, $60 was taken out. So it sounded like, for spending money for the week or something like that. But we didn't see any, anything odd about the money situation at all.
Okay. And let's move on to this now. You told me, so that's key. So as this money situation, once again, doesn't seem like there's anything too odd about it, given that he's 20 years old. Maybe if he's 40 years old, then that's going to catch your attention. Somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, 40 years old, we might start thinking about an addiction, whether a gambling addiction, drug addiction. But 20 years old, with that I don't know that that means much. In addition, as Greg, you pointed out a couple times, he kind of left a couple paychecks at his job, right?
Right. Yeah.
If he had to pay anybody off, he could just get one of those checks and maybe handle it.
And why would, if he did owe money, why would somebody do something to him? You're not going to get your money,
It's true.
If you do something to him. So, nobody ever, came to us saying he owed money or, anything like that. So, that we really didn't have a lot of knowledge of.
And another thing, if he was going to take off, he would have waited to get his money.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is missing besides your son? What are the possessions of his that are missing? Of course, the keys of the car would technically aren't his possession are missing, but what else is missing? What other things?
Not much. I mean, the only thing I could think of was what was on his person. We got everything out of the apartment and we got it boxed up over here.
All right, like, so his wallet, though, is missing, his ID, those things, those are missing.
Yeah, that's
Right. We never found that.
Okay, and including the card that was actually his fiance's.
Right,
Correct.
in the car. Yeah, and it was checked, and and nothing, no charges were made after when he used it at 10 o'clock on the 10th. That was the last time it had been used.
Okay. You'd mentioned that you did something that you didn't know was that he had kind of reconnected with some of his high school friends. What did they have to say about all this? Any of them come over to your house, offer an opinion? Do we know where any of they were? We know where they were that night? What can you say?
Well, the last time we got a new detective on this case, like a year ago, maybe a little longer. He was starting at the beginning when all this happened. Debbie and myself took a polygraph test, and he was going to go to these people you're talking about, but he didn't have time to do it before he retired. Now, I don't know what this new one has done, but I don't really know on any of that.
All right, so all I'm asking is, for example, if, like, one of my best friends of all time, his name is Doug. And if I was hanging out with Doug and he goes missing under similar circumstances and I have nothing to do with it, I'm sure that I would have showed up at his parents' house, saying, hey, this is the last time I saw Doug. Seemed like things were going well in his life. I'm a little confused. Can I be of any help? Did any of those guys or women ever do anything like that?
No. And that's what's strange about all this. Nobody's willing to come forward to say too much about it. Like they don't want to be involved in it.
Okay. What has, can you say, if you know, did Chris and his fiancee end up getting married? What have they done with their lives since 1997?
Yes, they ended up getting married. They had a child, and they got divorced.
They did. Okay, what kind of lives have they lived? Straight and narrow? Any problems with the law?
I don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
How about you? No?
Deborah, you don't know anything about that either?
Well, not positive. I think I had come across some maybe some criminal activity.
Okay.
On the girl's part, that she'd gotten in trouble for something. I'm not sure what it was.
Okay.
But,
all right. I gotta admit, it doesn't sound like you want to talk about it. That's fine by me. You're being a little hesitant.
I mean, it's public knowledge, but like I said, I don't know these people, and I really hate to say.
All right.
What they did or did not.
No problem. We'll leave it right there. Let's move on to this. You told me, Deborah, several weeks ago. We've been talking for a while. There has been some people called Solve the Case that have been helping you. Who are they? What's been going on with them?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. The founder is Aaron Benzik, and he is a homicide detective in Plano, Texas, which is a couple hours from us. And he had come across the FBI have a flyer out. So I guess at work he came across Keith's flyer, noticed that it said Wichita Falls, Texas, and he's like, "Oh, I'm from Wichita Falls. This is kind of strange, And kind of looked into the case, and he saw where Keith went to Ryder High School, which that's where he went. And they actually, they kind of overlapped. Keith graduated in 95. Aaron graduated in 97. So they may have even passed each other in the halls, but they didn't technically really know each other. But since there was that connection there, Aaron called up here to talk to one of the detectives that was on the case and offered his assistance and all that. And then he got a hold of us, and he started this organization, a nonprofit called Solve the Case. And what it is, it's like a website that families can enter all the information about their missing loved one, or maybe if there's been a murder that is unsolved, things like that. And it's pretty neat as far as I can go in, and when we find out more information, or we found that something has changed or something, I can go in myself and correct the information or add information to like the timeline or some of the facts of the case. So that's pretty unusual, because most of the time when the information is on somebody's website, you don't have the control to do that.
Right.
You have to get a hold of that person, they whether they want to change it or not or whatever. So this is pretty nice that we as a family can do that. And Keith was the very first case that they had on there, and now they're up to 800
Wow.
cases. It's good that so many cases have that exposure, but it's sad, and that there's so many cases, and this is just a drop in the hat. There's so many other cases out there. So, but we encourage people to look at that. It's solvethecase.org, and you can read up on like Keith's case and other cases around the country and find out more about it. But they've helped us quite a bit. They paid for a digital billboard campaign back, it was in 2023, and it came out right around Keith's birth date. So that was pretty neat to see that up there. They also he's been going to what they call Crime Con, which is a big convention, for all the crime podcasts, just different things like that. And he always puts Keith's flyer up there there's a big board of missing people, maybe in the murder too. I'm not quite sure if it's just missing only. But so they raise awareness of Keith's case, keep it out there. And he also, his organization was the one that helped us. We tried to get the files, the police case, and we went through the state attorney general's office, and of course we were turned down. We appealed it, and they said because it's still technically an open case, they don't want some of that information out there. So we weren't able to do that. But it's just, things like that he's able to help us to do. And just with his knowledge, just being a homicide detective, his mind, he has a lot of knowledge that he can share with us, or, help us figure out things to do and all that. So we've been real grateful that they've helped us out.
Okay. Let's move on to this, and through this interview, both of you have been very vocal about this, but we're going to cover it specifically now. How hard have the last 27 years been?
Oh, it's
very hard.
Yes, it's been like the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And
Of course.
What's hard about it, for one, it's called having like ambiguous grief.
Yep.
It's like we can't 100% mourn that he's dead, because we don't know for 100% fact that he is. So we still have that hope that one day he still will, walk in the door, or he'll be found somewhere. So all these years we've had all that stress and the ups and downs of, one minute we hear a report of, missing person, unidentified person has been found, or a homeless person that resembles him, or remains have been found somewhere. So it's like, it's up and down, we're just all over the place, and we just don't really have any closure or anything. And it's just been really tough. It changed our whole family dynamics. I mean, his sisters, they were used to him being gone for short periods of time, like, maybe just seeing him in the summer or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then when he was gone forever, that really changed things up. and they didn't really get to mourn, and I'm sure it caused a lot of, emotional problems and things, and we were so focused on trying to find them that, maybe we neglected them in some ways, I mean, we tried to stay involved with them, but, it's hard when you've got this on your mind.
Yep.
24 hours a day, we're going to bed thinking about it, we wake up thinking about it, we talk about it all day long, and one of them, his younger sister, she was only about 9, so she was quite young, and of course, we didn't want her hearing any bad things, so, we would tell her, oh, go play in your room, this is adult talk, right now, stuff like that. So, it was hard on her because, like I said, she kind of got left out of a lot of things, and, I feel kind of bad about that now, and it's just, like I said, it's been hard. They've gone through a lot of hard things in their life, and everything would have been different, if Keith had been here and him and Carrie had gotten married, and they could have had kids, and it's just the whole thing just kind of took a different path.
Yeah. For me, we're stuck in 1997.
Right.
We can't go forward, it seems like, and you have to be in this situation to understand it. You can feel for us, but
Yep. Nope. I don't know how you feel. Nope. I don't know.
We're here, and we've gone through all the stages: mad, sad, angry, you name it. Looking for him. Debbie and myself went out a number of times through the years looking for him. We've contacted psychics, things like that, even though I don't believe in psychics, but you get to a point to where you're desperate and you do just almost anything to know where he is or what happened to him and all. And I'm still, I'm still thinking we are going to find him. I've always thought we would, but we're getting up there in age, and we're having health problems now and things like that. And like I told you earlier, it's 27 and a half years and haven't found him. So someone needs to talk for us to find him. And it's just been a mess. It's a mess for our kids, a mess for my wife. It messes up everything. And then you think you're at blame for it and this and that. I think that if he did pull this car over here, that I didn't help him, so I feel kind of guilty about it. I wasn't there to help him if something did happen to him, and I'm all over the place, when we start talking about this, just like when I didn't say too much in the first place, but when we start talking about it, it gets really on me. I really have a problem with it. So, anyways, that's where I'm at.
It's totally understandable, Greg. It's totally understandable. Okay. Do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for Keith's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell the listeners about it right now?
Yes, we do. Back in 2012, our daughter, she was going to school to be a graphic design artist, and one of her projects, she was supposed to find a small business and help them like with marketing and build them a website and things like that. Well, she asked her teacher if she could do something for her brother being missing, and that her parents needed help getting the word out and all that, and her teacher luckily agreed. So she did that, made the website. It's the Missing Man Project.com, and then of course she did the Facebook page, which is kind of the same, the Missing Man Project, Keith Mann, and it's really helped us a lot, to be able to share things, get his flyer out there, because in the beginning, back in '97, we didn't have these tools. We weren't sure what to do. We were doing everything the old-fashioned way. We'd have to go to Kinko's, make flyers, put them up ourselves. We would mail a packet of flyers to, different people in different states. we had to call different agencies or, homeless shelters, hospitals, in the surrounding areas. And now you can come up missing and in 30 minutes, your name can be plastered all over the United States through all these, missing persons Facebook pages and things like that. So it's really helped us quite a bit to have this, and we're real appreciative that she did that. And she kind of, I guess you could ran it, the first year or two, and then when she got too busy with life and work and different things, and I've kind of taken over the last few years, and so it's kind of a labor of love. A lot of it is just, memories of Keith, and try to put up some pictures. We don't have a lot of pictures, as not like nowadays when you have the camera's right on your phone, so you take,
Right.
hundreds of pictures, all the time. I mean, we have very few pictures of Keith, or, and back then with our little cameras, you didn't even know if the picture came out until you got it developed, a couple of weeks later or something like that, and then realize, oh man, we missed the chance of, getting a good shot or something. So, it's really helped us to have this website and the Facebook page.
Okay.
It gives a lot of information, and then also, like I said, on the Solve the Case website, kind of goes more into detail of the actual, the timeline, the different facts. So it really helps to get it out there, and more people become aware of it.
Why don't you say the name of the Facebook page and the website one more time, please?
Okay, yeah, it's the Missing Man Project, and man is spelled, it's a play on words, the MANN
Yes,
his last name.
I like it.
The missingmanproject.com, which has, like I said, limited information and a lot of pictures. And then the Facebook page is the Missing Man Project Keith Mann.
Okay. Greg and Deborah, any final words before we complete this interview?
Well, we're just appreciative of you doing this, having us on, and
You're welcome.
letting us share about Keith's story and his case, and raising awareness. So we feel like that's kind of about all we can do at this point. It's hard after all these years to find new facts and things. So just getting it out there, letting people know that it's still going on. We still need information, and I'm also I'm building I've got a notebook going. I'm trying to write everything down now, so it's in a neat and orderly manner to where our daughters or grandchild may have to, take over the reins if it keeps going on.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're getting older, having health problems. We may not be here that much longer, and I hate for them to have to do it. But just in case, I'm trying to get it all organized. So, if there's anybody out there that, if they had called in information to the police back then, or if they know of something, if they would just write us, a message on the Missing Men Facebook page.
We'll definitely get it checked out.
Yeah, and I would just like to have a record of it, because like I said, since we don't have the original reports and files from way back then, it's kind of like we're trying to piece it together. We're trying to, get all the puzzle pieces that we can to put it all together. So it would be nice, like I said, if anybody has any knowledge, facts, not just speculation or rumors. We've heard all the rumors. We don't need more of that. But just, like back one time on the Facebook page, a girl had written, oh, yeah, I remember seeing Keith at, Southwest Parkway in Barnett, which would have been right there by his apartment. I saw him, that evening about, 5 in the evening, 5 or 6, something like that. And at that time, we were thinking it was 9 o'clock that he got off work, not, not early in the evening.
Right.
So I called the detective or emailed him and had him check it out, and come to find out, yeah, she was right. It was early in the evening. So, sometimes people have little bits of information that we didn't know personally, or, or I didn't write it down. Maybe we forgot. We're getting old now, and our memories aren't as good. and we'll think something is a fact, and then we go back and look at my notes, and we're like, oh, well, we're wrong on that. We've got something mixed up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have it all in a central location, and like I said, I'm trying to gather as much facts as I can to pass it on if I have to. But hopefully we'll find out soon. Like in our lifetime, we'd love that. Somebody will talk. Call in to the police department, some kind of tip that will help us, or hopefully one of these days, maybe some remains will be found that they can positively identify, and then we'll finally know. But it's like we just need something to happen as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, some of the disappearances that I've featured on the podcast have been solved. And at least a few of them have been disappearances that are much older than Keith's.
Oh, really?
So you never want to give up hope. We had a disappearance that happened in 1989 in Michigan that got solved, I think, around 2019. And then, bizarrely, the oldest disappearance that Unfound ever featured from 1945 got solved this year.
Oh, wow. Was it like through DNA?
It was, but the thing was, the woman had walked out of her life. She was married, and her name's Mary Jane Van Gilder. She was married, had kids, and she walked out of her life, met a new guy, had more kids with him, and she ended up dying of cancer in 1989. And then through 23andMe and Authorman, they figured out that this woman who had died in Arkansas was a woman who went missing from Ohio in 1945. And in fact, not long before she died of, I think it was breast cancer, she had told one of her grandchildren, "I have a secret, and I hope nobody ever finds out."
Oh, wow.
So, you can never give up hope on these things.
Yeah.
It's not all the newer disappearances that get resolved. A lot of the old ones get resolved too, and there's a variety of ways that can happen.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping, that even 30 years later, I hope, like I said, we can see him again and he'll just walk in the door. That would be so wonderful. And then then we can know, okay, all this other stuff was just rumors and it wasn't true, and
you get all the explanations you need.
Yes.
That's the problem with that's the problem with blaming somebody, is not knowing. When you've done it all these years, blaming somebody, and then they come back.
Yeah, that would be awkward.
Yeah, that would be bad. Yeah.
But we just don't know what to do. You got to be in it, like I said, to understand it.
Deborah and Greg, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you for helping us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was my November 30th, 2024 interview with Deborah and Greg, the stepmother and father, respectively, of Keith Mann. I thank them both for joining me and all of you on this episode. The tough part about Keith's case is that it's hard to categorize. It's not the man said, at least not in my opinion, because my impression is that the friends told the truth. Yes, they really did drop Keith off and have no idea what happened. It's not drugs play a role, because that wasn't Keith's scene. It's not the walk-off. Well, it could be, but hard to understand why Keith would walk off from a spot near his parents' house instead of just walking off from his own apartment. Now, I'll admit, this could be the art of luring type. However, there is no proof Keith got lured to do anything. In contrast to the disappearances of Tyler North and Jeff Nichols, for example. It's a murder, but because we have no suspects, and we have no reason to believe from the disappearance itself that Keith was murdered, like what we have with Patsy Action or Jody Husentrut. So it's a league of their own type, a rare kind indeed. And what's tough about this kind is These are the ones that are the one-offs, ones where there are no similar comparisons. Sure, I could say, I think he was meeting a woman at 12:15 a.m. that night. In fact, that's what Chris eventually ended up saying. And I could say I think that because he didn't want to tell his friends who the person was. Keith had a fiancee. Why is he meeting a woman at 12:15 a.m.? But my insight would be coming from my anecdotal point of view, not from a statistical or scientific point of view. On the other hand, to go the opposite direction, I could say Chris and his fiancee harmed Keith somehow. Then the two went about planting the car, the beer bottles in the apartment, and the story about Keith going to meet someone. However, this would fly in the face of the reality of disappearances. Rarely is staging part of a covering up of a crime. And if there is staging, seldom does it go to the extent of this example. Yet, I suppose there is a first time for everything. Yep, Keith's is a tough one. And what I would say is, his parents have come too far, a long way, to get the answers they deserve. With that, I'll leave the public theorizing up to you. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.